Everyone hear the beep? I hereby open the Master Plan Implementation Committee, November 8th at 6:30, and call the meeting to order. Our first item is the adoption of the agenda. Has everyone had a chance to look at the agenda? Does anyone want to make any comments or modifications to the agenda? I would like to, our old business line item A for zoning review, which depends on Jason Duda attending, and he spoke with me via email and said that he was going to attend the meeting. So I think we should postpone that line item until he appears and then interject it next after whatever we're talking about. Does anyone have a problem with that? No? So we're going to keep old business 5AA as a flexible line item. We should probably vote on that. Are there any other modifications to the agenda? All right, there is a motion, to keep 5A flexible. Is there a second? Okay, any discussion? All in favor? Aye. All against? Any abstentions? And it's unanimous. The next item we have to deal with is the minutes. I looked over your minutes. I thought they looked great. Does anyone have any comments or modifications to the minutes? Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All against? Abstentions? And it looks good. All right. I'm glad to see our public with us today. Do you have any comments that you want to add to the committee? Anything you want to discuss? Nothing from the public?
I guess I should pull my chair over.
Yeah, you're with us. It is relaxing over there.
I mean, it just feels like we're cutting them off, so it's okay.
As you wish. All right, then, let's move into old business. We're skipping A, as we discussed, until Jason Duda comes in. That puts us at a quick discussion of the farmers markets and events. Have you met with the Ag Commission?
Nope, not yet. Okay. Put in the calls, didn't get a direct return. Got a kind of through the grapevine indication that there were some people that thought it was a good thing. There were some discussions I started with folks that are involved in the Northampton farmers market, and so we were talking about ways that would or would not translate. And we came up with some things that probably aren't necessary to detail, but they're the kinds of things you might expect, where we were talking about what level of foot traffic is necessary before it makes sense to have, the juggler or the piano player, and how you generate that and support the real purpose, which is the farmers. So, don't have much more to report yet.
Okay, so we'll catch up more on that in the weeks that follow. Does anyone have any comments or support that they want to add to that? All right. Student public art and regional arts collaboration. Who's going to talk with Burns? Neil, who is not here at the moment. I recommend we table that until he shows up. Any issues with that? No? I think we can skip a vote on that unless someone disagrees. Which brings us to streetscape improvements. Okay. I have no new information on that.
Well, that was the item that I was going to check on the EDIC.
Yeah.
And I did check their meeting schedule. I haven't talked to anybody over there yet, but I know that they meet, the local works, I guess, meets the 13th and the 27th of this month. The EDIC regular meeting is on the 20th. So I know I'm not available the 13th, but I was going to see maybe if the 27th or something, if I could sit with them. If not, it might be a little bit later, but I'll at least check with them and see what their schedule is and maybe have a conversation about what we talked about the last meeting.
Local works on the 27th, okay. All right, we look forward to hearing more. Thank you for attending that.
Kind of, I guess, I think it would be a proper, I don't know if addendum is the way to put it, but I just kind of wanted to bring everybody in on the fact that I went to the cultural district meeting, which is where Lisa was as well, and one of the things that I kind of, I guess, committed us for, maybe is a little strongly wording it, but I'll put it, I'll put it this way. You guys know about the cultural district overlay plan, right? So one of the things they were needing were 15 collaborators that would help them fill out the form and get that in on time. And through some personal discussions I'd had, it was suggested that the Master Plan Implementation Committee would make a lot of sense to be one of the co-collaborators, since some of our agenda items are the things that would actually be part of the cultural district plan. So, without us really technically being obligated, I guess we're not, but I did voice my opinion that I thought we would probably be amenable to the idea that we would collaborate with it's basically with the ECA, but especially with the cultural.
What was the name of the committee again? I kind of missed that.
This committee?
No, the one with the cultural council.
I don't know.
You mentioned, just mentioned it.
I did. The ECA? The
cooperation thing with the cultural district, the committee to plan that.
Right, yeah, it's the cultural overlay is what they're calling the, technically once you send that to the state, that's what it becomes. And overlay is, I think, just a fancy way of saying this area on the map.
When is that going to come to us? When will we have sort of a request for putting together our part of that proposal?
I don't know. Actually, that's a good question. They were going to have a meeting Monday, and then they decided to put it off to a better time.
I don't even know if we're going to have to put anything together, or if Burns is going to be putting it together, and she's just got to be able to say we have this group on board and that group. So that
technically,
may be.
All right, so
that's all that really amounted to is, are we willing to lend our name to the list of co-collaborators for that project?
Okay, this seems like a no-brainer, but I think the group needs to discuss and maybe have some time just in case anyone isn't familiar with it, step away, look at what we're talking about. Also, this isn't the line item we're on, so we need to kind of interject it, but I think it's an important...
Yeah, I'm sorry, and the reason I had wanted to interject it was because during that meeting, one of the things that I ended up, again, these are mostly the results of private conversations, but with a conversation I'd had with one of the ECA members, I made a proposal for an idea that was meant for ECA to try to get funding for, and that's that they were kind of looking for the next Bear Fest. And I'd been talking about this for years, to be honest, but I brought up the idea of a kind of a facades beautification program.
And there we get to the segue of streetscape improvement. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, except last time we did talk about the cultural district in the context of soft streetscape improvements as a place to look.
Okay, that makes me feel better. Thanks.
I think what that means is they might be looking to get grants and artists and businesses together to collaborate basically on, it's one element of the streetscaping, because I think we were talking about some of the other streetscape stuff, which is a little more of the, the
long-term
nuts and bolts,
thing.
long-term.
Yeah.
And this is just more like a Bear Fest type event-related...
Summer flash.
Yeah, summer flash
That's
thing.
still very valuable.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I thought was well received about it, as I was pointing out, that, hey, if we did this, then everything that happens for a long while afterwards, that's one more thing that draws people to the town. So the reception was pretty good, and I've been told that there are a lot of green lights and the doors opening up, so they suggested that this will probably happen.
Personally, I would love to support Burns and that group in any way I could in this. I think we should talk about it again. Do you want to keep it under streetscape right now because that's where the idea is? Or when they come to us, just wait and we can add it as a line item? Or how do you...
I don't know what you guys think. Yeah, it was just a...
I think it's kind of consistent with the streetscape theme if we're talking short-term
So just leave it where it is.
strategies here.
Okay. And the next step is to wait for them to come to us?
I can have I'll check. I'll have a conversation with them and see what the next step is. I think right now all they needed was to put our name on the list.
Yes, because Burns is doing the paperwork. The application is going in at some point this week, I believe, to be labeled a cultural overlay district. Then someone will come from Boston and go through the area, and then they'll decide maybe, okay, it's supposedly going from Main Street up, down Union, up up Cottage, essentially. But they, who knows, they might decide that it should only be Cottage Street, or that maybe we should have 2 districts, because someone was also mentioning Pleasant Street, so there might be a district from Eastworks down to Paragon, say. So that's the next step after Burns puts the paperwork in. But she just needed to be able to say, we put our blessing on this.
Does anyone not bless this?
Yeah. That's,
We're all in agreement.
yeah.
Well, not all of them, but I
That's,
was pretty sure.
yeah.
Well played, John, well played. All right, anything else relating to streetscape improvements? So local works meeting 27th, and we'll hear more, and I'm sure we'll hear more about the cultural overlay district as that proceeds. That puts us into our regular items, as opposed to quick items. And the next item on the list is the wellhead protection plan. Need more time, or?
Yeah, I have some more information I can share with you now. I did find, we're pretty good as far as ordinances go with the southern part of town, which would include the Hendricks Street Wellfield, Pineswell, Brook Street, and Nonotuck. But the Maloney Well in the northern part of town, I did find some discussion here. I can read it to you. Recommendations were not adopted and got bogged down. I'm not sure what recommendations these refer to. I'd have to look through the whole report. This is from the Barnes Aquifer Committee annual report for this year.
What's the well? If I ask?
We set on an aquifer.
Okay.
Maybe.
Didn't know that.
Yeah, we do. And so the wellheads are the tap points, right? And what we had brought up was that they should be protected. And this is sort of the follow-up to that.
Okay, so the designation for the northern aquifer area in town. Easthampton sought to propose a standard based on the thickness of the clay layer. There's a clay layer that goes from anywhere from 0 to 90 to 100 feet of clay that protects, like the downtown area, from the aquifer, or vice versa. But the DEP at the time did not want to have different standards for the northern part of the aquifer than the southern part of the aquifer in Easthampton. Pioneer Valley Planning Commission revisited the question with a DEP official about allowing for a standard based on clay thickness. DEP noted that there were many holes in the clay layer and so many unknowns that it puts a great burden on property owners to prove thickness of the clay layer. DEP does not have a mechanism to allow for such a standard, but the city could formally petition DEP for an allowance, seeking relief from regulation. The DEP official noted that the city ought not be hopeful about the outcome of such a petition. So basically they're saying it's not going to fly. And this petition refers to protections or not waiving protections because there's a clay layer, so you could have a gas station there or something like that, or some hazardous waste generator that would be allowed, which is typically not allowed in an aquifer area, or especially a zone 2. Bob Newton, who's a professor at Smith College, observed that holes in the clay layer are limited to areas where the eskers are present. In addition, the pressure from the underlying aquifer is so high, he noted, that the groundwater flows up and out of these holes, which would presumably keep the contaminants up and out of the aquifer. Clay ranges in thickness from 0 to more than 100 feet in some places, and the thickness could be determined based on a method called seismic refraction. So the Pioneer Valley Planning is actually working on this. We're gonna bring this up with the Barnes Aquifer.
I have to ask you to repeat that last part. Seismic what?
Refraction.
Okay, thank you.
I can get you a copy of this if you like.
I'll be looking that one up on Google.
There you go. Given DEP's position, Pioneer Valley Planning briefly discussed with Easthampton's new planning director, Jessica Allen, how to begin exploring the implications for the city. Extending current aquifer standards to the northern part of the city would result in pre-existing non-conforming issues. Any change of use in particular location would need to conform with the new zoning. So that would eliminate some businesses, if anybody, or eliminate some businesses that would want to come in, which are now would be allowed, but they wouldn't be. So
I see a lot of hurdles
yeah,
coming up here.
definitely. So getting answers to several questions may be important. What studies have been done to date on the aquifer area? To what extent does the northern aquifer area have land uses that are prohibited by current aquifer zoning? Has there been a delineation of the clay layer? Are there ways to manage uses outside of zoning? So that's the questions we need to answer regarding that. Some possible steps. This is what the Barnes Aquifer Protection Committee and Pioneer Valley Planning is looking at. Explore implications of not being able to use clay thickness standard for the Northern Zone 2 in Easthampton. Once a proposal can be made to establish an aquifer protection zone in the north, former city planner Stuart Beckley has suggested that BayPAC hold one meeting with the planning board to inform them about the ordinance changes and then go to the city council to present on the issue to them. It would be good to get 10 voters interested in the issue to help support the changes. Guess what? So that's where it stands on the northern part of town.
Well, that is some great information, and I want to commend you on bringing you back a lot more than we knew. Keep that up. I look forward to seeing the report.
Yeah, I'm going to try to put a binder together with all the information that's, on the development of the standards, background information, and where we are with the current regulations and where we need to go with the northern part of town, obviously. Also, like I referred to last time, is making it kind of a living thing. I already spoke with Pioneer BayPAC, and we were talking about the Groundwater Association, or I'm not sure that's the proper name. They're out of Nebraska, but they do a thing called Groundwater Guardians, which is kind of like a public interest group, and they do basically it's kind of a community event. And geared towards protecting your groundwater, and so I'll be getting some more information on that, and I'll be sharing that with you also.
Great. It seems like we've kind of been in limbo, but there are these groups that are, kind of looking at the situation, big hurdles, dealing with business and income, especially in this climate.
Right.
But still, we've got to protect the groundwater. Striking a balance here is going to be important. And I'm glad to hear that. I feel like we're making progress just in finding out.
Right.
Anyone have any questions or want to know more? Harry?
I'm just curious if the Conservation Commission knows about this clay thing. They must have something, they must know about that, I would think.
I would imagine. I'm not familiar with anybody on the Conservation Commission, so I don't know what they know and what they don't know.
Yeah, because every time they're going to start something, they're going to make the Conservation Commission goes out and they do on-site.
Yeah.
So they must have, they have drawings of the town where this clay is 0 or 100 or whatever happens to be the thickness. Well, they must know where those areas are, hopefully.
Yeah, or
No, hopefully.
Yeah, we hope. And I found it fascinating that the pressure is so high it's pushing things up, because that is really a point in the favor of preservation, I think. So.
Yeah.
And I had true everywhere.
That's a good question, yeah.
I live in a hill town, Wendell, and one of the things the highway boss told me is that because pressure goes up, even though we're on a hill town, you would think the water, could only go down and our water source would be pretty clean. But actually, what ends up happening is that the salt, I forget what it's called, hydrochloric stuff that they use to put on the highways, can actually go up into Wendell and can work its way from the highway up into the water supply because of water pressure going up.
Oh, so it has negative effects as well.
Yeah, so just something to be aware of, that it goes, it depends on where the pressure is and how it's going. But that's geology, so.
We might want to, well, you're our resident expert on these issues. Are you comfortable answering these kind of geology questions as time goes on, or do you think maybe we should reach out to an expert at some point?
I can answer a lot of them,
Okay.
not all of them, but I do have somebody that I can, speak to also that knows a lot more than I do.
Harry, to your point, I think that it's advisable, once we get a report and something in writing going, that maybe the Conservation Commission is on the list of people that we, when we talk about who we're going to bring this to as a next step to get the ball rolling.
Well, you know what I found amazing, when we were taking apart the street, and they wanted to put that porous pavement in the Park Street development.
Yeah.
Well, come to find out, there was an aquifer that flowed right underneath that property. And I find it hard to believe that the CDC didn't really know that.
It's everywhere around here, isn't it? I mean, that's...
Well, it goes right underneath that particular, so they couldn't have it. They couldn't build that project with porous pavement. And they should have done their homework on that. 'Cause we must have spent at least a month and a half arguing with everybody down there. When that could be pretty hostile.
What project was that?
Parson Street.
Parson Street.
Parson Street Village.
I think what actually is happening over there is you have your layer of soil, and then there's a layer of clay, which probably isn't that deep, and that holds that water there. It's what they call a perched aquifer. So it's above, perched. It's above the other aquifer, which there could be 100 feet of clay there, but it's holding that water on top of it too. So it's not very deep to get to the groundwater.
All right, well, great report. More is coming, and do you think maybe the next time we meet or the time after that, or I think we might actually be skipping at least a week, given that Thanksgiving is our next meeting. So give me a sense of how much more time you want, and you don't have to be specific. And there's no rush.
Okay. Well, it's not it's not going to happen overnight, obviously. Like I said, I can just keep me on the agenda, and we'll take it. If I need more time, I'll let you know.
Okay, great work.
Okay, thanks.
All right, let's move to the Transportation Committee. Conversations with the DPW and Old MP Transportation Subcommittee. Does anyone have any information on that? Was that where you were going to go? Jason Duda was going to talk about that item.
Yeah.
And he was also going to talk about the zoning review.
Yeah.
There's a couple of Jason Duda items. He said he was going to be here. Hopefully he'll pop in soon. Let's hold on that and come back to it, okay? And see if he pops in. If he doesn't, we'll tack these on at the end. Any disagreements? All right. The Whitebrook Pool issue we talked about, it's tabled. I have no new information there, and it's doubtful that we'll have any new information for a while. So, maintain and extend the Manhattan Rail Trail. Ooh, so that's some info on that.
Allison was going to follow up with the...
Allison had contacted me saying that she wouldn't be able to make this meeting, but would make the next. So, unless someone's got any particular information about that, shall we table that until the next meeting? Till next. Yeah. Okay. Work with developers and property owners to create infill housing in downtown areas. I spoke with Jessica, and just to kind of catch everyone up on what we were talking about at the last meeting, I contacted her to get more information. It was really Allison's suggestion to talk to Jessica, which is a great suggestion. I'm glad that she came up with that. And so I asked Jessica, I said, I wanted to let you know, no, that's the wrong. I said, yeah, during last night's meeting, this was last week, we had a question about the line item working with developers and property owners to create infill housing in downtown areas. As we considered the task, we felt this required forming a committee, maybe put together from many other committees, that they would have to identify what infill housing prospects were, identify the owners of the properties, come up with a sales pitch and incentives to convince property owners and retailers to sell it. This is her response. Jim, I believe this task could be accomplished without the need of a new committee. The Housing Partnership is in the process of updating their housing production plan. Part of this plan is to identify parcels for affordable housing opportunities, and as a member of the MPIC will be meeting with the HP next month, this could be a topic of discussion. The MPIC should also look at the 2004 Community Development Plan, which I believe did go through a mapping process to identify parcels for housing. I have a copy in my office and I could share it with you. Now, I haven't been able to meet with her since I got this email, but I look forward to seeing that because it indicates they've done that work for us, which is a big part of what we were worried about. Let's hope that it's complete.
I'm realizing too, we should make sure everybody knows MPIC is the Master Plan Implementation.
Yeah, we're the MPIC.
We should say that at the beginning of every recording.
What's info housing?
It's a good question. You came up with the best description of it when last we were together.
It's using existing land that you could develop for housing that you do not need to do any sort of major development for. So infrastructure, water, gas is already kind of there. So if you think of a storefront that has a speck of land next to it, you could develop housing there rather than going and developing
In a field.
in a field.
You had a great example, I think, at the last
That's
meeting.
great. That's great.
7-Eleven.
Well, there's a 7-Eleven here, and there's a big chunk of land that's behind
Next
it.
to it, right? Yeah.
Next to it that's vacant. There is some housing behind it, but so rather than developing something and putting a whole new infrastructure, this you build off what's already there.
Okay.
So you use smaller pockets of land.
So she said that the 2004 Community Development Plan did a mapping process. She went on to say, if there's a need to go beyond the identification process in the housing plan and CD plan, this should be a role of the MPIC, and I could assist in the facilitation of the discussion. As for the sales pitch, I believe this role could be taken on by a few members of the MPIC, without the need for a new community. In addition, prospective buyers of large properties downtown in general usually call or meet with the planning department to determine what could happen with the property before they purchase. My first question is usually regarding the development of housing. So I tend to advocate at the city level regarding infill development. But market conditions and financing usually drive the development. And financing for housing development is difficult in these economic times, particularly owner-occupied. Rental is easier, but mixed-use developments often have a difficult time getting financing. First step, in my opinion, is to meet with a housing partnership in December to discuss. And in general, I ask that you please take advantage of the knowledge and experience of standing committees before establishing ad hoc committees to implement strategies, as implementation really should be the job of the NPIC. That's a fun statement. All right. I think she gave us really some of the critical information we need, which was what has been done before and what do you do. And it seems to me that if there is in fact a mapping already of what's out there, that it does make the job a lot easier. Is it easy enough for us to take it on? Is it still a full-time job as we sort of saw it in the beginning? What do you guys think is left? I mean, it's approaching those people and seeing if we can find, convince them through a sales pitch. That does seem to me that she's right. That's something that could be done by, select few. What do you think? Any thoughts?
I would think we could do it, but I guess the first step is we have to get the inventory.
I will take responsibility for going to Jess to bring that to the next meeting we have to find out what that is. I'll see if I can't, bring together a little evaluation of it after I look at it and copies if possible, and then we'll let everyone digest it and come forward. And at that point, we'll figure out what we want to do in terms of do we want to do it ourselves, who do we want to go to. Does that seem appropriate for everyone here?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. All right.
Could you share that email with us? Could you CC us on that? Or, I don't know what you're...
That's yours. I'm sorry, I can't reach any further. That's all. There you go. If anyone else wants it, then I can CC it. Okay, so the next item, we had some new business. Work with developers and property. Actually, that was the last item that we added, was adding infill housing. Wasn't there something on the energy committee? Let me just make sure real quick here. Yeah, there we go. We established a new business discussion item to establish an energy commission. That was talked about at the we put it in as an added item at last meeting. I don't have that. We haven't had a discussion on it yet. So first thing to do would be, I guess, look at the master plan, see what's in there, and then we should start talking about what we want to do, who we want to approach, and who wants to take this and run with it. So wasn't this line item 6, if I recall? You're wrong. Establish an Energy and Sustainability Commission who can be charged with implementing an ICLEI Cities for Climate Protection Project conservation contract, boy that's a mouthful, to promote energy conservation in city operations, an assessment of risk and development of renewable power projects, local renewable power projects. Well, I think it's definitely important. I know we've got some new stuff going in with the solar array. Anyone have any expertise with power here? Any experience? Yeah.
I have solar panels on my house. And a little bit about it, but what are the questions about it?
Well, really, I think the issue that we're out here is to get a sustainability commission. We're supposed to basically put together I mean, it looks to me like what needs to happen is, despite her earlier message, we need to form a committee. Can we take a quick look here in the book and see if we can dig a little bit deeper into where the details of that item are?
Page 124 is the start of it, and the goals start on 133.
Energy and sustainability. If you all don't have a book and want to share it, come on down.
Over your shoulder.
Sustainable Easthampton looks for ways to be a self-sufficient community, which includes growing more food locally, generating energy locally, creating more local jobs, keeping local businesses alive by purchasing locally made or grown items. So energy and sustainability. This particular line item was for an energy commission. So I'm going to kind of just skip to the back here to where they have the chart of potential items at the end of each chapter. It's a bad way of putting it. Chart of goals and strategies. Here we go. Reduce the city's greenhouse gas emissions. I'm just going to skip through these. That was strategy 1. Strategy 2, 40R Smart Growth District. We've talked about that. I know, Harry, right? We had Southampton come in and maybe do something with Big Y. We already have a 40R in play, at least one, right?
Yeah, nothing's been finalized or anything, we just had general talks about it.
Establish green building codes. We're talking about that in the planning board right now. Encourage green school designs for new and updated school buildings. I think that's happening with the new school construction from my conversations with Michael Burley. Although I'm not entirely sure, that needs to be investigated further. Adopt a city ordinance that requires city departments to purchase the most fuel-efficient, low-emissions vehicles available. I have no idea what we're using in the city right now. Do they give you a vehicle, Michael?
Yes.
Is it a low-emission vehicle?
It's an old cruiser, actually. But if they do buy vehicles, they have to buy green vehicle now. So.
Okay, so there is some regulation for that.
Yes.
Okay. Strategy 6, replace current traffic lights with LED lights to reduce electrical consumption. That's a great idea. I don't know if it's been done or not. Anyone have an idea?
I think it was.
Oh, okay.
Then we have their overall second goal, which is to promote sustainable transportation options, particularly bicycle, pedestrian, and mass transit. I think this is really where we were striving in our first conversation, right? Where goal 2 is why this kind of came onto our agenda.
This is where I
And the strategies here are to work jointly with the Transportation Commission to support public transit, bike, and pedestrian features. Complete the Manhattan Rail Trail. I think that's been completed, but we have maintenance issues and maybe extensions. That's a separate line item on our agenda already. Build safe and adequate sidewalks in all neighborhoods. I'm not sure, can anyone think right off the top of their head where we're missing a sidewalk? Maple Street. Maple? And a side, that's right. It only goes a little bit down past the Maple School, and beyond that, it's not. But they have it on the left-hand side, right on the right. True. East Street? Yeah, well, that's it, right?
McKinley.
Okay, I don't know McKinley off the top of my head. Where's?
You know where the Wright House is?
Yeah.
If you're going toward the Wright House, it's the right before it.
Okay. All right. Encourages the relocalization of food and energy supply, economic production, and services. The strategy is to lease and contract for city-owned land with agricultural restrictions, should require growing a significant percentage of produce for local food. We don't have a whole lot of agricultural land here in Easthampton. Am I right about that, Harry?
We have a lot less now than you did, we'll put it that way.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot that's not being used. Yeah, I mean, on East Street along the mountain, the old Duda farm and, along in there. And Thomas Esky had a great farm when I was a kid, right along East Street. Right above that farm where they have like shares where they buy, where they produce
The Caesar,
whatever they do there.
yeah.
That's the first section of the town that I think of too, and I think agriculture.
But you had, at one time, along that whole stretch, you had nothing but farms.
Yeah.
And, that was quite a while ago.
And up Park Hill.
Park Hill, yeah.
All right, prioritize economic development to support and increase the number and variety of crafts being produced in the city and sold in local markets. We have a new committee, which is the Local Works, and the EDIC, whose job it is to do exactly this. And I think with the proliferation and renaissance of our artisan community and ECA Plus, I think that item is really well in hand. That's just my opinion. Work with DPW to expand hours and days of service at the city's waste transfer station.
That's come up a lot, and
Well, they're open, what, twice a month, I think? Every other weekend, first and third?
Are we talking about the new place up by the solar array where you bring in your leaves and stuff at the end? That's the transfer station, right? And I go there a lot with the trailer full of leaves.
Well, that's the leaves and, but, they
one right on the Manhattan, right?
yeah, it's at the highway yard, they have recycling and cardboard and plastic and whatnot.
Okay. The goal, of course, develop incentives to encourage recycling and an 80% reduction of municipal waste by 2050. That's a long-term goal, 2050. I have no idea what has happened here. I think that might be a question for the mayor.
I'm really not worried about it too much by then.
I hope I'm still here then. Work with the DPW to educate residents and business owners about energy conservation and waste reduction. Create habitats for survival through green buildings, recycling, and environmental protection. Protect the Barnes Aquifer. We discussed that. Expand the protection of open space, which I wonder if that's in a kind of direct contradiction with the agricultural use. Plant trees whenever possible. And now we come to where I wanted to be. Here we have the list of things to do, and the number one strategy in order to accomplish all these goals is to establish an Energy and Sustainability Commission.
It seems this is a really big thing that would require a long-range team. And there's a lot of redundancy too, so it would be worthwhile to figure out where some of these things are already getting covered in one area, or a project that we're already on, or somebody's already on, because some of it could be pared down so that it wasn't such a giant undertaking for the committee. But
I agree, I absolutely agree, especially some of the stuff that's happened with the arts and economic development. But you look at something like the transportation end of it,
right,
and then you put that with the energy and sustainability end of it, all those items that we talked about, and I wonder, do those two really mesh? Is this commission really supposed to handle?
I would say that most of these, there's established commission.
Already in play.
There's not.
The book is telling us to
There's an awful
establish a
lot
commission.
related to the Department of Public Works, so that we collaborate with them on that. It's all about the rest of this transportation, agricultural committee. So creating another committee. So for things, and they would say, a new committee would probably say, well, this really goes to.
Sounds like a third of it you guys are already taking care of anyways.
I wonder if we could make it simpler by just first undertaking more of an information campaign. If what we do is kind of become ambassadors of the intention of the master plan, and make it a much simpler task, where instead of trying to make all these things happen, what we do is go to like the Transportation Commission or whatever, and just get our little 15 minutes at the beginning of the meeting.
Maybe just start by asking questions.
Yeah, and just kind of establish, well, what we're trying to do is just make sure that we're guided by the master plan, and reiterate what those intentions are to those groups, and then let them ask when they need help or form a committee, or you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I think that's reasonable, and I think you're absolutely right too. It doesn't seem like there's enough for a commission here. But the only thing, who right now in the city is responsible for just the energy part? Is there a committee for that? See, a lot of the other stuff that's in there, I agree, there's committees for. There's people to go to for,
Who did the,
but not the energy part.
who did the solar, I mean, I ended up talking to the mayor a
the mayor,
while ago.
yeah.
He pretty much did the solar,
As far as I know, I mean,
what is it
maybe
called,
there
solar
were,
fields?
Solar
I mean, the city council, I think, was
Yeah.
involved too, but
And when we were making the master plan, I remember, we talked about everything from the windmills up on the mountain to the fact, one of the things that's always gotten my attention is, well, we have the dam. Where am I pointing? We have the dam
Yeah.
right out there, and it's kind of crazy that it used to power an entire mill, and now it powers nothing. Why don't we do some? It obviously would be small scale, but some more hydroelectric and things like that.
That's a statewide thing, actually. I think there's somebody's gone and counted the number of mills that are, dams that are not being
Right.
used to generate electricity, and that's kind of, the infrastructure's already there, it just needs to be
maintained and
put back together.
Yeah.
So what we need to do then is we need someone or some ones who are going to go through this section and isolate which item belongs to another committee and can be approached, and which items don't and belong perhaps in the bailiwick of a new energy commission, and then kind of bring this bundle back to the committee so we can delegate each of the little, maybe someone's already going to see the EDIC, right? And we could add in that part, or maybe, you understand what I'm saying? And we can kind of split that out and then really hone in, as you said, into this specific feature. Who doesn't currently have a task and thinks this is something that you want to run with it? Okay, do you want a hand? Do you want a second person? No? All right, you understand the task?
Yes.
I love Kurt. Thank you. All right. I think that's a big one, so, a couple of meetings perhaps?
Yeah, by the next meeting. Should be fine.
Amazing, okay. So where does that put us? That's 20 minutes.
I know that like the planting trees and stuff, that's definitely, you've got people that are working on that. You can work with the Passamac Conservation,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of that could be peeled off in a separate tasks.
Yeah, we had Harry, the guys came in front of us to talk about, they were going to take some trees down for the electric company, right?
Yeah.
Who was that? That wasn't you, Michael, was it? No. It was someone, the guy that came with him, the tree warden. Who is that?
I don't know the guy's name, but they're gonna cut down 4, 5, 6 trees over on Bill
That's-
Street.
yeah, I think he was a neat guy. I liked
Over
him.
where?
Yeah, he's
Well,
the,
Bill,
it's also the park,
They took two down on South.
Where are they?
corner of West Street and,
Is the Manhattan Railroad?
road comes from Southampton toward West Street.
It's already met on both sides, but they might expand it to take it to things like connected to White
trees around it was small.
like little local
Yeah, they took two
extensions.
down on South.
And that and maintenance are big issues. All right, so I gotta get us back on track. Guys, it's 7:12. We're about 45 minutes into the meeting. We typically go for about an hour. We have a couple choices. I can see if the doors open to Jessica's room and we can break out our handy dandy list and pick some more items to add to the list. Actually, I've made an error. Let me reverse myself. There's a couple items we have to go over. Jason Duda didn't come, and we postponed these items. We might not be able to talk about them, but we should at least see if anyone's got anything new, okay? The first was zoning review, to monitor developments and see about the committees that Jason attends. Without Jason, I have nothing new to add, but does anyone here have...
Actually, let me jump in on that a second. I remember from the last meeting, we talked about me attending a meeting in December of the ZBA, I think it was.
Yes.
Was that, because I'm looking back in the minutes and I'm seeing my name in there, so, under that item, so maybe that was mine.
Maybe that was yours and mine, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, forgive me, let me change that.
My bad too, I should
Yeah.
have noted it earlier.
I think I must have misput the name in. In December, obviously.
I understood it was December 5th or something.
December 5th.
We had mentioned it at the last meeting. I'll have to check back on the exact date though.
Okay. Thank you for correcting me on that. All right, so that we'll hear more when the time comes. Harry, do you have any connection to the zoning review board?
No. ZBA?
ZBA?
No.
The other thing that we postponed, that's it. was zoning and transportation committee. And I have no new information on the transportation committee. I know that's something you were gonna...
I talked to Jason, and frankly, I expected him to be here tonight, and frankly, what he said to me is that I was the one who knew more about it than he did. And it's one of those things. Easthampton needs better bus service than it has. It needs 7-day service. It needs to go into Holyoke year-round, not just when HCC is in session.
What's preventing that? Is it there's not enough bus users? Or?
No. What's preventing that, what Mike told me, and this is a long time ago, is that it's not going into Holyoke year-round because HCC pays for it to go up there in the fall and spring semesters, but they don't pay for it over the summer. So it's a matter of money.
So it's the summertime when we have limited access.
It's summer when there's limited access and there are no buses on Sunday at all.
Well, I know the public transportation is a regional transportation issue, and there's a regional, I think it's handled through the Pioneer Valley Planning Committee or with them, and I know that, I'm pretty sure that Jess goes or participates in that to try to make sure that Easthampton's effort. So maybe the first step is
talk to them.
Talk to Jess to see where.
Yeah.
Do you want to take care of that? Because it's your thing?
Just to see in what way we can maybe augment what she's doing or support.
There's also something that I guess I just want to put out on the table. It seems to me a lot of times like what I do is kind of come up with these harebrained schemes and see if I can get them up the flagpole and get everybody to salute. And one of the things I was working with Stuart on before he left was one of my craziest harebrained schemes ever, and it was kind of the result of the master plan committee work and the desire for better mass transportation. And so I want to just mention it to the group because it kind of falls in here, but...
Does it involve rickshaws?
Even better, gondolas.
Gondolas, I knew we were going to.
Yeah, so, I had talked to him about how I thought, what we were looking for was the equivalent of the light rail we had. And even though the historic folks all loved the idea that we would ever have trolleys again, talking to the town planner, it's like, yeah, that's never going to happen. The main problem has to do with the throughways, the buying linear lengths of throughway. So what I was trying to do was come up with the moral equivalent. What's the modern moral equivalent? And I realized, because I have a friend in Zurich, that gondolas fit the bill pretty well. These little, does everyone know what I'm talking about? Like, it's like the ski lift thing, except when you think of a ski lift, you think of like a chair with two people. Yeah, it does hang on cable. It's a cable car. Okay. And the modern ones can be a bus. Instead of that chair, imagine a bus. And they can be any size. They can be a small bus. They could, it can seat anything from 2 people to 20 people.
So they're suspended overhead?
Yeah. And some of the reasons why that ended up being desirable in the conversations I've had, it's a small footprint, because really you're talking about towers that are pretty distant from one another, so it doesn't interrupt animal throughways. It means you're purchasing less land and you don't need to buy all of the space between here and there. You just need basically the footprint of the poles, and then everything else is up in the air. And it's less prone to problems due to traffic snarls, road construction, snow on the throughways. Plus, I love the fact that if you were really good about it, you can make it electric powered. They only operate with a motor on each end. The little individual cars aren't aren't motorized. There are 2 big electric motors on each end.
This may come off initially as pie in the sky, but I love this because it also has an element to it that's more than just transportation. It's also
It's entertainment.
Yeah, you're bringing people in for tourism.
Yeah, and so I talked to him about this, and he actually really thought that it had credibility, and then he promptly left us. But I'm bringing it up now because I feel like it's one of the, it could be, I mean, again, I don't want to, toot my own horn here. I just kind of came to this through a lot of assistance with a lot of people, but it almost seems like something that we could do that would be unique and special here. I got to thinking about it because there used to be one up to Mount Tom. You could reconnect the 2 mountains as well because the cable car can actually go over the highway, something virtually nothing else can do.
Well, the other nice thing about that is if it's a blizzard, you don't have to come down that scary long hill.
Yeah, right, yeah. But then you also could connect the towns. So obviously Easthampton would be connected to Northampton, Northampton to Amherst ideally, and the 2 mountains. So I'm just kind of throwing it out there because I think of it as a transportation, as an objective of satisfying our need for better mass transit. But at the moment, it's still in this bizarre, harebrained scheme territory.
The existing models of the bundle is for
in Europe,
transportation
Europe,
versus tourism.
Yes, for transportation in China and spacing on what it was.
Zurich, wasn't it?
Well, Zurich is where I thought of the idea, but that wasn't. It's not for transportation there. It's for entertainment, going up to the mountaintops. But there's another place that it's for transportation. One is in China, and the other I think is Sweden. Maybe I'll look it up. I had it, and I have contacted some of the companies that do this.
That's what I was going to ask next. Yeah.
And we started that conversation. With
Can you get them to send a press kit? I'd love to see a press kit.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I may already have one if I can dig it up. So I kind of throw it out there just because it feels like it might fall into this, and I don't want us to do a whole bunch of work that. I mean, maybe the work should be done in tandem, is what I guess I'm thinking. That we could do it so that the other things we're working on are all
It's definitely transportation related. Mm-hmm. So we were talking, and you mentioned the regional transportation committee and talking to Jessica. Mm-hmm. And so the concept there is to sort of find out what she's already doing. But I think also maybe finding out what some other communities have done might be a really neat idea. We might be able to come up with something interesting and new by sort of just examining. So maybe if you won't mind contacting just some of the other local communities and say, hey, have you guys done anything unique or interesting with transportation or solved any problems with having bad public transit? Maybe we can get some sign of what their struggles are, how they approach them. That might be helpful to us as well. I love that idea.
Thanks.
I
feel pretty
I know.
passionate about it.
I know one thing that the PVTA has done that a lot of people were not pleased with was when the Nationwanic started, the drivers had a cell phone on them, and so in the evenings when the dispatcher had gone off, if you wanted them to make a special stop somewhere to pick you up, you could call. Now, they no longer have their cells, so only if there's a dispatcher there can you get through to them and tell them, they won't go out of their way more than a quarter of a mile. But that's.
I didn't even know they went that far.
Yeah, you can get. They won't make a special stop at a time of your choosing, but if you're within a couple of minutes of their route, they'll come off the route, pick you up, or drop you off, and so forth. Yeah.
All right. So
one more thing about transportation. I don't know. In the past, has anything been done to measure need?
Didn't the master plan, didn't we actually have a survey done? It was related to the Stop and Shop proposal, wasn't it?
Yeah.
There was a transportation survey done.
And it was, how many people use it now? How many people would use it? And theoretically, there were more people who would use it. Like, I know the Nashwanik doesn't go to some of the places that it used to go because they were getting,
145. I'm sorry.
because they were getting absolutely no one. No pickups, no drop-offs.
There's some
There's
trends in
sections of
data
the
in
plane,
here.
there's sections of the planes.
Yeah, it was included in
There
our
it
survey
is,
questions for one
46.
thing. And then I think we had an independent survey done as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a chart here of average daily traffic volumes in
Yeah.
October 2007.
Yeah.
It's pretty old.
You know, there's a lot of people I can't get to come to Easthampton from Northampton because they don't have a car and the bus is too sketchy.
And it's crazy.
Yeah.
We did have a gondola, that's the coolest
The
idea.
Nashwanik runs every hour and a half, and bus 41, I believe, is also on an hour and a half loop. They aren't necessarily on the same time, but they are frequently like within 15 minutes of each other.
Yeah. Just
And-
frequent.
No, it's not that they're frequent, it's let's say if bus 41 arrives at Town Hall at 9 o'clock and the Nashwanik arrives there at 9:15, the next time you'll see a bus at Town Hall will be 10:30
I see,
and then
there's big
10:45. Yes, there are
I see
those
what you're
gaps in there.
Okay.
And I know for a lot of the folks I work at Hampshire and at the colleges, a lot more of us would take the bus, except they don't run in the summer. You can only take the bus, in fact, they don't even run during the breaks. You know, so like for Christmas break, you can't take the bus to the school. I take that back. There are a couple buses, but it's not the regular short-term buses. It's like 3 a day to a couple of the stops. It's greatly reduced.
Now, there is a transportation committee
No.
of no kind.
No. That was what they were supposed to be set up. That was one of the things the master plan was supposed to do, and there isn't.
So energy and transportation do align seeing them in this because they thought one committee could kind of handle both. Although I kind of see them as different.
Yeah.
They really seem different. I wonder why they're in the same. I guess they're not. Maybe I'm putting them together. All right.
No, when the master plan committee met, it was all put together as one originally. But then it was decided that there needed to be a separate transportation commission
I see.
from the energy commission.
So we need to establish another committee? Is that what we're going to? Oh man, Jess is gonna hate me. Is that one of their primary goals under transportation? At the very end of this chapter? Create a transportation commission, staffed by members from various city boards.
But maybe the
That's number one.
Yeah, but there isn't one for the energy. There's just the one, the Transportation Commission.
Right, they're
Because the
separate.
energy,
I put those together. That's my
and the energy might not be a commission. That might be able to be delegated in a different way without a commission if we're trying to keep the commissions to a minimum.
Yep. Okay, so gather information is the homework assignment there. Bring us a really cool press release or two.
I literally, actually, now that I've brought it up to you guys, and if you're all approving of it, I have a designer who wants to help make pre-visualization mock-ups, and I already got the maps from Stuart, and so pretty much I could have like a PowerPoint almost, a kind of a show and tell for this.
Is the designer local?
The designer, yeah, works at Hampshire with me and wants to, do mock-ups of what it would look like so that people can get a sense of it. I thought of things like they should have bike racks on them so you can put your bike on and get off and.
You're willing to do this gratis?
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty smooth to do this. Is there anyone here that thinks that's a odd idea or awkward or bad? Harry? What do you think?
Absolutely.
What do you think?
In the first place, who's going to pay for it?
That's a good question.
Where's that going to come from? Everybody's up in the hawk. You can't pass an override in Easthampton for a school system. So
you
why
might
would
be
you
able-
possibly get funds for a gondola system?
Well,
That
you
just
might
makes
be
no
able to
sense.
entice a small business owner to start as a small business.
Might be profitable.
I mean, I can see ways in which you...
I can just imagine
You can see it by finding pilot program grants.
just the money alone, just for insurance purposes, trying to insure something like that, in case you got hurt on something like that. I mean, there's so many. I'm not saying it's not a good idea, it probably is, but to get it up and running, I can just imagine trying to go to the Pioneer Valley Plan and say, look, we're going to put a gondola system from, say, from Hoyleton to Northampton through Easthampton, and they just go.
Yeah, that's a big problem because you got to talk to all. I mean, even though you're skipping a lot of lines, it's still a lot of properties. And
Plus
if
you
there's
got-
train
you got-
tracks anywhere in between, they own those all the way down to the center of the earth and all the way up into space.
Do they really?
So,
Wow.
so I mean, crossing them is
I
a
mean, you
big deal.
got to talk about land use. You got state property, you got like Easthampton property, Northampton property, Hoyle property. You got all the different properties that have to be somehow, organized.
That part is a challenge. I saw that initially, but the idea itself is a neat idea. The question, granted, there's a lot of hurdles in the way, but.
Oh, it'd be great. You could just snap your finger and get this all done. It'd be great.
Well, I mean, would you write
Try to get that organized? Come on.
Well, here's some of the things I thought, and actually Amherst's town planner has said that they thought it was a good idea.
Amherst, I believe it.
Yeah. And so what I could do is just kind of put it out as, I always thought that if we were to move on it anyway, you'd have to have public support first anyhow. So it's almost, I think of it as maybe a bit of an ad campaign,
Yeah.
just trying to get people to say, oh, okay, because definitely there are big money hurdles, and I'm sure there are other hurdles I haven't thought of.
But you shouldn't let the hurdles stop us until the hurdles stop us.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Just go ahead and put it out there to try to get.
Spans between towers, just curious.
What are the distances?
Yeah, between towers. You have to have.
You can go, actually, you'd be shocked. I was shocked. I actually thought that's crazy because they can do miles.
Really?
They can do miles.
Harry, did you have?
I don't think you could. It depends on the height.
We were having a hard time just trying to get Pioneer, the buses to go just to Parsons Street.
Yeah.
We had to get them on board just to try to get transportation from the people that are going to be living at Parsons Street Village. Have a bus stop there. Plus, we were working with the buses to stop at the new Stop and Shop if it ever got built up on Northampton Street. I mean, just to try to get that organized on a lousy bus
Huge
route
amount of effort,
was difficult. And so I can't even imagine.
I don't think there's anyone that would look at this project and not have the words pie in the sky pop into their head. But you know what? Sometimes these things work, and I think it's worth at least looking at. So.
I'm happy to put it together and try to get, if people are.
Like Star Trek,
Yeah, sure. And, it's a long shot, but I'm willing to do the work because I kind of already want to.
It's only conceptual at this point.
Yeah, it's just conceptual,
So I mean, why
exactly,
not show what it,
Right, why not draw?
what it could be?
You get an artist to draw.
Just talking about concepts like that are good for the community. It brings in, that we're creative, that we're
Yeah.
artistic, and who knows? With all the creative and artistics we have, we might find enough initiative to make something happen.
Here's one of the things that Stuart had said, because I came in very skeptical. I'm like, this is crazy, right? He said, compared to what it costs to build a road, oh no. He said, much cheaper, much. It's like, what, $3 million a mile to build a road, something like that. And according to the company in France that I was talking about, they were talking about $1 million a mile. And that was their total, turnkey figure. They're like, it's like $1 million a mile. And that was for a round number. And I thought that was just crazy expensive. I'm like, oh God, that'll never happen. But Stuart's like, that's a third of what it costs to put in a road.
Yeah.
So, not including the purchase of the land. That's just the construction.
Yeah.
So,
Which needs to be repaved every 7 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, although you could repave it every 30 years if they added crumb rubber to the pavement, but they won't.
Aaron?
I was thinking about you guys and all your committees. Maybe it'd be a wise idea just to get a hold of all the different boards in town and communities and have them submit to you guys the committees they have that are already in process of doing whatever they're doing. So you wouldn't have a duplication of everything you're trying to do.
Request a report from every committee.
Yeah, to find out exactly what they're working on. That way it might save you guys some time. They're doing the same thing that they're doing. I mean, if you want to trust what they're doing.
I love that approach. I'm willing to do that personally. I have no problem just sending an
It'll save you a lot of time.
Yeah, we ought to, I think it's a reduce redundancy.
Yeah, that's a great
I think
idea.
it'd tighten up our efforts a lot.
Yeah. Is there anyone here that doesn't like that? Then I will do it. Jim, email every committee. Now, whether or not we get a response is a whole different bag of beans.
But we can just put it out there that we're trying to reduce redundancy. You know, there's no point in two groups working on the same project independently. We just let everybody know. We're just trying to make sure we're not.
Yeah, you're talking about trees, and we got our chairman of our Route 10 business highway business over here, and he knows all about planting trees, Mr. Cannon, and I imagine Mr. O'Donnell and whoever else is involved there. And then we have the thing in the planning board about planting trees. We just got from the Pioneer Valley Planning.
The green energy.
Yeah, with the roots, and I mean, it was just a total overlay on trees.
Oh yeah, they went into some detail.
Big time.
All right. Well, I think we're getting late and we need to wrap it up. That's the last item we have. We have some good questions to ask of other committees and groups. It's too bad Jason wasn't here. I would have loved to talk to him. We'll try to get him here next time. Before we go into setting the next meeting, I'd like to read something to you from Allison, who couldn't make it tonight but said she'll be at the next meeting. She asked me to read this. She said she wanted to provide an update that perhaps I could deliver for her. I contacted the Manhattan Rail Trails Committee, she said, and am planning to attend their next committee meeting, which is Monday, November 26th. She's asked the committee members, Wendy Hammerly and Barbara LaBombard, whom she emailed, if they had any brief status update that she could share with the committee in advance of her attendance at the next committee meeting. That request is pending. She'll forward it if she receives anything before the meeting. So she just wanted to let you know that that's what she was up to with the Manhattan Rail Trail. All right. I have no other reports or announcements, so we have a couple options. We can skip a week, which will put us back in sync, I think, with the planning board, right? We're just skipping 1 week, which means that instead of meeting 2 weeks from today, we'll meet 3 weeks from today. Or we can stay in the pattern that we're currently at and meet 4 weeks from today. Anyone have a preference?
Well, the 3 weeks from today would be the 29th, and I know we have a highway business meeting on the 29th.
Oh, yeah.
So
So we'll be losing some people right off.
Yes.
yeah, I would go to the 4th week.
4th week, which would keep us in sync.
Yeah.
It's also my personal preference to go for the 4th week because I like to stay in the pattern. Otherwise,
Yeah, me
I
too.
forget things. Is there anyone here that disagrees and would rather meet 3 weeks? No? Then we will see you 4 weeks from today, Thursday. Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.